Blog Talk Radio.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. I'm William Bell, and with me today is Dr. Don Preston from Ardmore, Oklahoma. How are you doing, Don?
I'm doing all right, William. It's been a really, really long day, but it's been a good day. So,
well, that's good.
Getting excited, getting ready to, as you are, to speak at a seminar this weekend down in Texas, and can't wait to be there. Can't wait. You know, pardon me. It's so great and so exciting to hear from people who are themselves so tremendously excited about the truth of covenant eschatology that they are coming to understand. I was privileged to speak with for that group down at Victoria, Texas, early part of the year. And now that group, pardon me, has grown tremendously. And they're going to have this weekend get together. You and I are invited, along with T.J. Smith from Texas, and we'll be down there speaking. And boy, they're going to have barbecue laid out for us. They're going to have all sorts of good times planned for us, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, I'm excited about it as well, and especially because it's kind of a laid-back situation, so I don't have to worry about choking myself with neckties and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they informed me very clearly that this is definitely an informal thing. Now, folks, if you happen to be in the greater Houston area, our get-together will be down there in that general vicinity. William, do you have the address there handy? I don't have it handy right here,
I can look it up.
Okay.
If you'll give me a second.
We might let everyone know that where the address is, because they told me, they said, let everybody come that's able to come. So, like I said, folks, if you're anywhere near the area, then you're more than welcome to come. And like I said, they're going to have a barbecue layout. It's going to be a great time. I'm very, very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, the same here. And it'll give me an opportunity to meet some people that I'm sure I haven't met before, and just have the opportunity to have fellowship with them, and then spend some time just kind of chilling a little bit. So that'll be great. I like the atmosphere.
That's right.
They set this up in.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'm trying to pull this up. I think I should have it here.
Well, I apologize for my voice. My voice is giving me a great deal of trouble this evening. I thought I had kind of gotten over that during the day. Been struggling with the allergies and what have you, so I'll do my best. I used my respirator a moment ago, but we'll see if that kind of kicks in or if it's already worn out or whatever. Got a little bit of water here, but we'll do the very best that we can.
Okay, I've got an address here. It's the Cot N Coffee. That's Cot,
Yes.
the letter N, Coffee, at 1724 F as in Frank, M as in Mary, 1291. That's Round Top, Texas, 78954. Again, that is Cot N Coffee, 1724 Frank, Mary, 1291. Round Top, Texas, 78954. Let's see if we have any additional information here. Hold on a second. I think there's some additional information that we can probably give you. Well, I tell you what, if you go, here's a phone number. If you need to contact someone there, the phone number is 210-827-4513. Again, that's 210-827-4513, and that is for Wesley Stevens.
I do know that there's some folks going to be there that I have corresponded with. They have communicated with me a good bit. One gentleman in particular contacted me just recently, and he said, hey, I'm in the Houston area, and was just wanting to know if there's anyone down in this part of the country. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, there is. They're in Victoria. Now, Victoria is a good long ways from where we're going to be this weekend. This Round Top is evidently about 2 hours from Houston itself. So I've never been there. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. But that's a huge area down in there. But anyway, I was noticing that on the list of folks on the email mail out with the announcement that this gentleman that had contacted me about hoping that he could find some other preterists, that he is on that list and he is intending to be there. So that will be good.
Yeah, it's very, very good. And, what's interesting is, we're getting calls that the preterist view is growing quite well these days. And there's quite a bit of alarm going on as a result of it as well. People are getting a little bit edgy about it. I had a conversation with an elder in one of the Churches of Christ on yesterday, and we talked extensively. And, of course, he was mentioning quite a bit about how concerned some people are getting because this is, really growing and taking off. And, of course, it's something we knew that was going to happen all the time, and it will continue to happen because people, when they understand the truth and they're searching for it, they're not going to settle for anything else. And all you have to do is just read some of their stories or listen to them as they share those stories after they've come out of some of the things that they've been in or after they've been searching for so long to make sense of these passages. And they finally, find it, finally begin to understand it, and they just love it. And you can't stop it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's so humorous. You know as well as I that every once in a while some of the detractors, the opponents of covenant eschatology, they'll post on Facebook, "Oh, this movement is dying. It's withering up, going away." That was posted just last week by one former preterist. "Oh, this movement is dying," and I just literally busted out laughing when I read that comment on Facebook, because just that very day and that very week, I had just had one new contact after another, just one new contact after another. And this invitation to Texas to speak down there with a group that is growing. And I don't know if you received the Facebook message or not, but I have received just over the last couple of weeks notifications and private messages from folks in South Africa and in different parts of Africa telling me, this one individual, and I need to go back and find that as a matter of fact, this one individual told me that he had been watching your videos and watching my videos along with Daniel Rogers' videos. And he said, I just want you to know that you guys are reaching out far beyond America. You are touching the lives of people all over the world. And it was just a really, really exciting private message.
Yeah, well, I know that to be true, both from conversations like those that you're having, as well as people who are contacting me, but also from just looking at the stats on the website. I mean, there are just tons of countries where people are tuning in and they're listening to the information that is that's being shared. I'll give you some of these countries just so you can get an idea of what the reach is, and I'm sure you have some of the same thing going on. But I mean, they're just all over the place. Of course, the largest audience at present is the United States, and that's understood and to be expected. But at the same time, I mean, you got Poland, you got the Russian Federation, Panama, Belize, Germany, France, Ukraine, Great Britain, Canada, China, Sri Lanka, India, Australia, the Netherlands, the Philippines, South Africa, Brazil, Nigeria, Romania, Sweden, Chile, Mauritius, the Czech Republic, Italy, and a host of others. I mean, there are tons more. So it's not something that's hidden in a box somewhere, and they think that the only place it's found is on Fulfill Radio and on Facebook.
Yeah, and this individual that I mentioned, this former preterist who posted that the preterist movement is literally dying, and somebody else chimed in with him, said, of course it's dying, anyone can see it. And I posted back and I said, I put the LOL, I said, you guys literally have no idea what you are talking about.
Yeah.
I said that's one of the most ill-informed comments that you could possibly make. They didn't have any comment in response to that. It's but what you pointed out there, William, about the visitors to the websites, it is literally astounding to go into the analytics of our websites and to see all of the countries that are represented by the people visiting the websites and reading the articles, the time that they are spending on the website, reading the articles. Pardon me. And it's like you said a moment ago, certainly it's true that the majority of growth is in America. But, William, you and I can well remember the time when if we heard from somebody from an additional state in America that we hadn't heard from before, it's like, whoa, cool deal.
Oh, yeah.
And now it is one country after another. And not to mention the fact that in America it is just growing everywhere. So I went ahead and responded to these two individuals. I said, when you try to say that covenant eschatology is dying, I said, you guys are literally whistling as you walk by the graveyard. I said, you are terrified at what the reality is because it's growing, and it's growing. It's growing, and furthermore, there's not one thing you can do about it. So I got a big bang out of all that. Yeah. William, I was sitting contemplating, you and I called each other a few moments ago and talking about what we were going to talk about, and we settled again on the resurrection. And in the few moments since then, I got to thinking that so fundamental to the entire issue of resurrection is the simple doctrine of the last days. Over the last few weeks, I've had people, well, are we in the last days? Aren't we in the last days now? What are the last days? And, of course, I wrote a book, The Last Days Identified, some years ago, and it's been extremely helpful to an awful lot of people. But it is simply an axiom that the resurrection would occur in the last days, at the climax of the last days. So, if we can demonstrate, and I have to tell you, I know that you've had people tell you this. I've most assuredly had tons and tons of people tell me this. If you can prove to me that we're not in the last days, if you can prove to me that the Christian age is not the last days, if you can prove to me that the last days, when spoken of in Scripture, is a referent to the last generation of Old Covenant Israel and the end of her age, then it's all over. I mean, there's no way out of it, because the coming of the Lord, the judgment and the resurrection, would be at the end of the last days. So if we're not even in the last days, then there is no future eschatology. I'll never forget two different individuals that I had studied with, interacted with a good bit. And I was at the house of this one couple one night. We had been studying. They had a lot of questions. And the issue of the last days came up. And I shared with them just a few fundamental facts about the traditional view of the churches of Christ, that we are in the last days, that the Christian age is, in fact, the last days. And the guy just stopped me. He said, well, that's all I need to know. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you just proved that we're not in the last days. And he said, if we're not in the last days, there is no coming of the Lord in our future. There is no judgment. There is no resurrection in our future, because everyone knows those things are at the end of the last days. So if the Christian age, number one, doesn't have an end, and if the Christian age is not the last days, it's game over. And I said, well, yes, that's a real simple way of looking at it. He said, I like simple things. And he said, you just proved beyond any shadow of a doubt, we're not in the last days. So far as I'm concerned, it's game over. I go, well, okay, that was pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to demonstrate that point to people, and to just let them see how simple that concept is. I remember, when I first just had it to influence me, I think I was sitting in the audience one day listening to a lecture, and the statement was made that the Christian age has no end, so there can be no last days in the Christian age.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, what a profound, but at the same time, simple statement of truth. And it just makes it so easy. I mean, you sit there and what can you say to that? And what's so strange about it is that it's taking others, and I'm talking about people who are known for being Bible students and have talked about the last days, I mean, just about all their lives, who still don't get it.
You're absolutely right. William, when I had the debate in June of this year with David Hester, it's not often that you see a visible response on the part of the audience. Other than, occasionally you get people that are on either side of the aisle and they're kind of demonstrative. But when you make a point, and when that point is like an electric shock that runs through the audience, visibly runs through the audience, and I'm talking runs through his side of the audience, then you know that you have made, shall we say, brownie points. And I believe it was in my first or second affirmative, I made the point. The Christian age has no end. And I made the point just very simply. And when I saw that visible reaction, that electric shock that just flashed through the audience, I I saw husbands and wives turning to one another and mouthing, "Wow." I saw eyebrows being raised. I saw people literally shaking their head, not in disagreement, but in shock at this very simple and yet very profound point. That's why I repeated that point during that first presentation. The moment I saw that reaction, William, and you may remember it, I don't know, but I went ahead and drove the point home even more. Let me repeat this point. The Christian age has no end. David Hester is arguing that the Christian age will come to an end. The Bible says the Christian age has no end. David Hester is wrong. And I repeated that argument over and over again during the debate because it was so visibly obvious, so visibly undeniable that a lot of people in that audience, his people, were seeing that simple but profound truth for the very first time. And it was shaking them up. You could tell it really shook them up. And William, I'm like you. I will remember seeing for the first time while I was still living in Shawnee, Oklahoma, studying in my office every single day, encountering this undeniable reality that the Christian age has no end. And it's just one of those profound truths that when you look at the literature, when you look at debates that have been held. Just recently, William, I was reading some of the comments by Dub McClish that you know and I know, long-time prominent member, preacher in the Churches of Christ. And he was arguing against dispensationalism. And Dub McClish made the argument, one reason that I know that dispensationalism is wrong, because they talk about Christ ruling and reigning for 1,000 years, but the Bible says that the kingdom has no end. And I was like, oh, wow. So here is Dub McClish arguing the kingdom and the rule of Christ has no end. Later in that very same presentation, Dub McClish says Christ will rule until he hands the kingdom over to the Father and he will cease to reign. And you're going, oh, wait a minute. You just said 10 minutes earlier that Christ will rule and reign forever without end. That's your argument against dispensationalism. And then you turn right around, and by the way, Wayne Jackson, an outspoken critic of covenant eschatology, has made the identical argument at times in the past. I have heard members, preachers in the Churches of Christ and in the broader amillennial world make the identical argument. Christ's rule is without end. He shall rule forever and forever. And then turn right around and say, well, we all know that Christ surrenders his throne at his coming and at the time of the resurrection. Folks, that's a contradictory view. If Christ's rule, if Christ's reign on the throne is a reign, rule and reign, without end, guess what, folks? There cannot be an end of the Christian age. There cannot be an end of the last days, because we're not in the last days, because the Christian age is not the last days. It is just astounding to me. So perhaps it would be good for us, William, to just rehearse this evening this fundamental fact that the Christian age has no end, that we are not in the last days. And I will just, kind of lead it off here. In Isaiah chapter 9, 6 to 9, unto us a son is given, unto us a child is born. The government shall be upon his shoulders, and of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. Now, I have had people argue, and it's a purely diversionary argument. They have said, now look, you know that the Hebrew word olam doesn't mean without end. Well, that's true. I argue that point myself quite often. Thomas Thrasher, in my debate with him in Alabama a few years ago, and you were my moderator, of course, William, when I came across and presented the argument on Isaiah 9, 6 and following, Thomas Thrasher got up and said, now, Don Preston knows very well that the Hebrew word olam does not mean without end. And I got up and I said, I do know that. I admit that. The problem of it is the word olam is not used in Isaiah chapter 9 when it says no end. Thomas Thrasher was simply desperate. He was trying to offer a diversionary argument, hoping perhaps that I didn't know that olam was not used in Isaiah chapter 9, but rather a very distinctive construct in the Hebrew is used there. And so here is one passage that says of the increase of his government. Now, the increase of Christ's government has to be evangelism. It is growth. Of the increase of his government, there will be no end. And I have asked people over and over again. I have asked it in formal public debate. I have asked it in private correspondence, in private discussions. How can that which has no end come to an end? And I've had people stand up to my face, as it were, and say, well, because the Lord's going to come at the time of the end. And so they completely ignore the emphatic language of no end and say no end actually means it will end at the end of the endless. I mean, it just makes no sense whatsoever. So that's one of the verses that, to me, is just so extremely, extremely powerful. It's simple as all get out. And by the way, I have an extensive discussion of this passage, as well as the other passages that I'm sure we'll get into this evening, William. In that book that I mentioned earlier, The Last Days Identified, it's just when you just take a simple look at both the Old Testament and the New Testament passages that affirm the unending nature of the kingdom of Christ, the rule of Christ, the reign of Christ, then it becomes almost a staggering question. It's most assuredly a challenging question for our opponents. Upon what basis do you deny these emphatic statements that Christ will rule forever and forever without end? I've never had a good answer to that, William. So that's one of the passages that I would deduce first off. You can follow up on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that certainly is a good one. And I do remember that debate with Thomas Thrasher that really threw him for a loop on those arguments that you were making on that. It seems like he just kind of lost it there. Because he wasn't expecting, what your response was going to be to that material. And it appeared that he had put a lot of stock in the argument in terms of his presenting it. But in addition to that, and I just kind of wanted to follow up a little bit on just that concept of the fact that the Christian age, the kingdom age, has no end. And this is where we get into the concept of the last day as well. Because if there is no end, then we have to make sure that we are ascribing the concept of the last day to the right age. And the only age that came to an end, or that comes to an end, as far as, the Bible goes, and of course, if you want to talk about multiple ages, we can talk about that too, but they all end at the same time, and I'll mention that momentarily, was the Mosaic age, the age of Moses, the age that preceded it. And this is what Matthew 24 and verse 3 speaks about, when it says, what will be the sign of your coming? When will these things be, referring to the temple, and the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So the statement in Matthew 24 is all about the consummation of the age. And of course, that's in the same context of the overthrow of the temple and the parousia, or the presence of Christ. So the age that was ending, and that the disciples asked Jesus about when he had spoken about the overthrow of the temple in chapter 23, and even in other chapters prior to, was the Mosaic age. And the end, therefore, as one of the speakers said on the Southaven lectures, for example, in Matthew 24 and verse 14, he said, not the end. Well, in other words, that wasn't the end they were trying to affirm in those lectures, because they were talking about the end of time, which is a concept that does not appear in the Scripture. It was the end of the age of Moses. And so when you're talking about the last day, which is the time of the resurrection, that is to be placed at the last day of the age of Moses. And that's what the last days refer to. To present a scripture, I would use Hebrews chapter 1, where, and there are many of these scriptures I'm sure we can get into, but God, who in various ways and at various times spoke in time past unto the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son. Now, a lot of people will take that and they will try to interpret it from the position of where they're standing today, or even from the perspective of which it was written. But he mentions a historical point in that text, in that he says Christ spoke in the last days, referring to his personal ministry. And it shouldn't take a lot of, rocket science, as they say, to reason that Jesus died before the Christian age began. So he could not have been speaking in his personal ministry in the Christian age. And of course, Hebrews 9:26 says he often should have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once at the end of the ages he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. He also died in the end of the age, but not at the very end of it. I remember a mutual friend, the person who introduced us, wrote an article on that very point, and that's why I never forgot it. But he wrote an article on that very point, and he said the Bible doesn't say Jesus died at the end, at the very end of the age, but it says he died in the end of the age. And the same was true that he spoke in the last days. But those last days were already running their course prior to the day of Pentecost, prior to the beginning of the Christian age. And if that is the case, then the last days are not a reference to the Christian age, but as you're developing, as we're sharing, was the last days of the age of Moses. And that's where, as you were sharing about the gentleman that you had spoken to, we have to place the eschatological events that are mentioned in the scriptures.
Yeah, those were some of the very simple points that just blew me away. That when Christ appeared at the end of the age, at the end of the world, so to speak, to use that terminology, it was like, oh, wait a minute. He appeared at the end of the age to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, Hebrews 9:26. He certainly did not appear at the end of the Christian age. He appeared before Pentecost. He died before Pentecost. Pentecost is supposedly the time when the last days began, but Christ pretty clearly died before that event. And so those really simple and undeniable facts are some of the things that just really caused my head to spin on my shoulders almost as I began to seriously take a look at this. And I think the point that you made there, William, about the last day would obviously occur at the end of the last days, plural. And, of course, one of the key arguments that the postmillennialists tried to make is, and by the way, Gary DeMar, Joel McDermott, many of the prominent postmillennialists of the day agree that the last days is a reference to the last days of the Jewish age. Now, Kenneth Gentry evidently saw a train coming of what it would mean if you admitted that the last days referred to the last days of the Jewish age. And so Kenneth Gentry, on the one hand, admits that the end of the Old Covenant age occurred in AD 70. He admits and agrees that Christ came in AD 70. And he even admits that Israel's last days ended in AD 70. But then he turns around and completely, totally redefines the term last days, and it's no longer the last days of the Jewish age, that is the last generation. Now the last days refers to the entirety of the Christian age. So Kenneth Gentry changes horses in midstream from being the last generation of one age to the entirety, 2,000 years so far in counting, to the entirety, the entire span of another age that, once again, the Bible says will never end. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible, the verbal gymnastic that these men play. Now, one of the absolutely key arguments of the postmillennialist is that the resurrection is on the last day, and the last day must refer to the end of time. It cannot refer to the last day of the Mosaic age. Of course, you've got to ask yourself a question. And I have posed this question to different individuals who have tried to make that argument. And I have said, okay, the last day must refer to the so-called end of time, the last days or the end of the Christian age. If you're going to tell me that there cannot be the last day of the Old Covenant age, and by the way, in my first debate with Joel McDermott, or in my debate with Joel McDermott, I made a point similar to this, although not the entire thing. I asked him why it was necessary that while he admitted that the last days is referenced to the Old Covenant age, the last generation, did not the last days have a consummative last day? He would never answer the question. He knew that if he admitted to the simple logic, and that is the last days have a last day, then he would be surrendering his argument. But here's the point that I wanted to get to. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, we find the prediction of the resurrection. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall arise, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting condemnation. Well, that prophecy is emphatically and specifically posited to be fulfilled at the time when the power of the holy people would be completely shattered. The countdown to that total shattering of the holy people was to be at the end of the 1290 days and the 1335 days. So the question therefore becomes, since the resurrection would be when the power of the holy people is completely shattered, and the consummation of that period of time is the 1335 days, William, wouldn't the 1335th day be the last day of that eschatological countdown?
Yes. I don't think it could be anything else.
I do not see how it could be anything else. So Daniel gives us a 1335-day countdown for the consummation, which includes the resurrection. And that means that 1335th day would be the last day, which is the day of the resurrection. Well, that means it's got to be the last day of John 5, of John 6:44, where Jesus said, of all those that the Father has given me, I will lose nothing, but I will raise him up at the last day. Well, why is that not the last day of the 1335 countdown of Daniel chapter 12 that gives us the prediction of the resurrection of the just and the unjust of John chapter 5, 28 and 29, which would be on the last day of John chapter 6, 39, and John 6, 44 and 45, and John chapter 10. It makes no sense whatsoever to divorce the concept of the last days from the concept of the last day. And oh, by the way, it makes no sense whatsoever to divorce the concept of the last hour, which is when the resurrection would be. You know, John 5, 28, 29, the hour is coming in which all those that are in the grave shall come forth. Okay? So the last hour is the last day, which is the consummation of the last days. Well, in 1 John chapter 2 and verse 18 said, little children, it is the last hour. And as you have heard that Antichrist should come, even now there are many Antichrists, thereby you know it is the last hour. Now, it's staggering to me how the postmillennialist can argue so effectively that the last days were the last days of Old Covenant Israel, turn right around and then completely and totally divorce the last day from that framework. And then guess what they do? Kenneth Gentry does it. Gary DeMar does it. Joel McDermott does it. They go to 1 John 2:18 and they say, well, that last hour there is obviously the last hour of the Old Covenant economy, the end of the Old Covenant age. So the last hour belongs to Old Covenant Israel's age. It is the last hour of her Old Covenant age. But the last day cannot refer to the same period of time. Boy, you talk about an inconsistent eschatology. It is incredible. But it all goes back to that really simple point that we've raised, William. The Christian age has no end. If the last days has no end, folks, there is no last days that refers to the Christian age. There is no last day that refers to the end of the Christian age. And there is no last hour that refers to the last hour of the Christian age. It simply makes no end, no sense whatsoever. As I said on one occasion, it doesn't even make good nonsense. Some of the arguments that futurists make in trying to justify the end of the Christian age, it doesn't even make good nonsense. And I got to share, William, not long ago, I think he sent this to you as well. But Brother Lloyd Marshall from Daleville Church of Christ sent me an email asking me if I'd heard the following argument. I had not heard the argument. And he said it seems to him like it's a pretty home run argument, and I absolutely have to agree. No question about it. I don't know if he sent it to you or not, but here's the argument. In Genesis 49, Jacob called all of his sons together, and he was going to bestow on them the patriarchal blessing. And he said to his sons, now these are the sons of Jacob. They are Israel, as we come to know them. So Jacob says, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. And Brother Marshall made the very astute, very excellent point. Okay, if the last days is a referent to the Christian age, then here we have the prophecy that Israel's promises, Israel's blessings, would not even begin to be fulfilled until the Christian age. Oh, but wait a minute. We got a real problem here. Because according to the amillennial view, God was through with Israel at the cross. David Hester affirmed that in my debate with him. God was through with Old Covenant Israel at the cross. Oh, wait a minute. Once again, if Genesis 49 is a prediction of what would befall Israel in the last days, and if it is the case that the last days refers to the Christian age, then that means that Genesis 49 would only begin to be fulfilled starting on Pentecost, which means that God's promises to Old Covenant Israel would not even begin to be fulfilled until Pentecost. Folks, that's boy, you talk about a really weird position, therefore, that the amillennial world is placed in. I mean, how could you affirm that God would be through with Israel at the cross? How can you affirm that the last days is a referent to the Christian age and deal with Genesis 49? And I wrote back and I told Brother Marshall, I said, that is an absolutely devastating argument. And no, I had never thought about that. So I suspect, William, if we were to present that argument in a debate context, after our amillennial opponent had affirmed, no, the last days refers to the Christian age, they would all of a sudden get up and say, well, now, there may be a few instances in which the term the last days refers to the last days of Old Covenant Judaism, but that's not the way it's used in the majority of cases. They would be caught red-handed, as it were, and forced to change their view basically on the spot. But I mean, this is a fantastic argument. When you go down the line of the blessings, the promises of Genesis 49, that was to befall the sons of Jacob, i.e. Israel, and to befall them in the last days. My goodness, it presents difficulties. And by the way, one of those promises, let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Now, that's the King James translation. So, the scepter would not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. Now, a lot of people want to make that refer to Jesus' incarnation. I don't think that's what it's referring to at all.
No, it's not.
I think this is Matthew 21:43, where Jesus, speaking of Jerusalem and Judah, the kingdom of heaven shall be taken from you and shall be given to another nation, bringing forth the fruit thereof. And that taking away of the kingdom from Judah would be at the coming of the Lord of Matthew 23:40. The master of that vineyard shall come and shall utterly destroy those wicked husbandmen who had persecuted his servants and slain the son. This is a judgment coming of the Lord. And so here we have the promise of the scepter not departing from Judah until the coming of the Lord in judgment to take the kingdom away from Judah. But that would also be in the last days. And so when you put these pieces of the puzzle together, you have God's promises to Israel not even being fulfilled until the Lord's coming in judgment of Judah in AD 70. Oh, wait a minute. Remember, they tell us, the amillennialists do, God was through with Israel at the cross. We're told that's when God took the scepter from Judah. But no, it's not, folks. Genesis 49:10 is a judgment context. If we take the King James or the New King James rendering, to him shall the gathering of the people be. And there's some divergencies of translations here. I'll be the first to acknowledge that and point that out. And in the Masoretic text doesn't have the gathering, to him shall the gathering of the people be. So there's some variance there. There's room for questioning. But if one takes the rendering of to him shall the gathering of the people be, and if that gathering is the eschatological gathering of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2, where Paul said, we beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the parousia, the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and our gathering together to him. If you correlate those together, then guess what? There's no denying that 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is the eschatological gathering. So if the eschatological gathering of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is the gathering of Genesis chapter 49, verse 10, that means that God's promises to Israel were not over at the cross. They were not over on Pentecost. And it means that the last days did not begin at Pentecost either. Now, that would have to be developed just a little bit more, but the point is still valid. And it all has to do with the fact that God's promises to Israel, Old Covenant Israel, would be fulfilled in the last days. The amillennialists simply cannot have the position that God was through with Israel at the cross and have the position that the term the last days refers to the Christian age and deal with Genesis chapter 49. It just will not work. I thought that was a fantastic argument.
Yeah, that's very good and very powerful. It's very clear that that in Genesis 49 that he said this would happen in Israel's last days. And so to project that out to the end of the Christian age, or to having those things not begin until the Christian age, is certainly going to be problematic for those who take such a position. But yeah, it's a powerful argument. I don't think that he sent that to me. If he has, okay. I haven't opened the email, which is not unusual.
Well, I started to say, I had somebody call me today. They said they had contacted you about doing a review of their manuscript for a book. You said you would be glad to do it. They sent the manuscript to you, and they never heard from you.
Oh, I haven't looked back at the email. I did send the okay, but remember what I told you. I said if you really want to get in touch with me, you know the email you need to send that to, and you probably didn't.
I suspect you didn't. But yeah. I told him, I said, look, dude, you got to understand something. I said, I'm probably closer to William Bell than anybody else. We talk constantly, but I said, it's not unusual at all for me to send an email to William. And I said, days and days and days will pass until finally I get a little bitty blurb back. Oh, just now saw this.
Yeah. Are you talking about the manuscript from Alan?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You know, I haven't seen that yet. I saw his initial email. Yeah, but I haven't seen. I think I need to look in another email address that I have to see if it's there. And if it is, Alan, if you're listening, I apologize. I do recall that you told me you were sending it, but I don't recall having received it. So I'm going to look elsewhere to see if it's where I think it is, and then if so, then I will take a look at it.
Yeah, and he went ahead and proceeded. We've got the book ready for publication now. He called me. He had received the proof copy today, was super excited about it, and so we talked about it. He's supposed to let me know in the morning if he finds any issues that absolutely have to be corrected or go ahead with publication.
Okay.
It's his. Do what?
I was going to ask, are you at liberty to expose the title of it? I can't recall.
Yes.
If not,
I tell you what,
no problem.
folks, this is a really, really good book. It is The Journey Between the Veils, Revealing the Glory of Christ.
That sounds very good. Sounds like temple stuff. Then. It
is temple stuff. And as you and I both have been investigating and exploring this subject over the last good bit of time, he explores the temple typology as it relates to Christ's incarnation, his passion, and his ascension into eternal glory. It is, William, if you remember, a few years back, he presented a lesson here at the Preterist Pilgrim Weekend on this very subject.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both talked about that, how it was a very, very intriguing lesson, but we both felt like there were a few issues, a few minor mistakes in his presentation that he had not considered. I know I went and talked to him personally about it. I don't know if you did. I assumed you did. But I went and talked to him, and I said, look, I absolutely love the material, but I said, I think I see a problem here and here and here. And he was at the time going, oh, wow, okay, hadn't thought about that, so I'm going to have to think about it some more. Well, he did. And he contacted me probably a year ago and said that he had been reworking the manuscript because he told me at the time, he said, I really, really, really think that this subject is tremendously important. I said, well, here's the deal. I said, if you get that in a book form, something that I think, if you can work out those problems that I personally have seen with your presentation, I said, Jadon Management would definitely consider publishing that as a book. And he was super excited about that. And so about a year ago, he presented me with an initial manuscript. There were still a few little very minor glitches in it. There were some areas that he had not developed sufficiently, in my estimation, in order to drive the point home, in order to confirm the point that he was making. And in the meantime, I had been reading a lot of Margaret Barker's books, just as you have. And so I shared some of Margaret Barker's research with him, and it just, just like it did with us, it just blew him away. But it completely segued beautifully into the material that he was already seeing. I mean, he had done some research, and I told him today, I said, you've developed some concepts that go even beyond what I had seen. And I said, boy, it's just super, super exciting stuff to me. I said, I try to keep an open mind to learn truth from anywhere, everywhere. I'm always open to change. And I said, what you've developed in this book is just absolutely fantastic. It's exciting to me. And so I was very thrilled to have the opportunity to be a part of bringing this book to fruition. And Lord willing, if he doesn't find any major glitches in it, I told him to spend the day going back over the manuscript, the proof copy. Let me know in the morning if he approves of it, and if he does, then I'll be ordering copies, and Alan Bondar will be announcing the release of the book. The book is not released yet, okay? If you know Alan and you want to buy a copy of it, contact him first. I'll be releasing the book after he does, as just a common courtesy to him. But I will be releasing the book. The book is about a 240-page book, and boy, I love it. It is Christocentric to the core. It is Christ-glorifying to the core. And so those who make the claim, William, you and I hear it all the time, oh, you guys, you rob Christ of his glory. You're not gonna read this book and come away and being able to make that argument. It's always been a false argument. But when you read this book, it's going to blow you away at how powerfully Alan Bondar shows how Christ in his ministry, fulfilling temple typology, is the glorification, or is the very epitome of glorified in his work. Well, folks, I want to thank you so much. I'm sorry, William, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I'm just excited to think about it because, that was the direction that I was going even at the lectures this past year and with that research. And so to see that he's already brought it all the way through, I can't wait to read it now. I'm totally excited.
Well, you're going to love this book. I think anyone that has even a basic grasp of temple typology is going to go, oh my goodness, that is incredible. So be watching for it, folks. It's coming up very, very soon. Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us for Two Guys in the Bible here on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. We truly appreciate you being with us every Tuesday evening. Those of you who join us live and those of you who watch or listen to the archives, keep listening. Tell your friends about it. And with that, I'm going to say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.